Welcome to My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. And on the show this week, we've got a ton of leaks coming out. Casting leaks and story leaks from the Kenobi live-action show expected next year, and then what we are speculating will be casting for the Ahsoka show. So I'll give you some details on that. We'll talk a little bit more Rogue Squadron speculation and your listener feedback this week. Plus, thank you to everybody who voted for my Embark science fiction series in the Tail Flick Discovery contest. I will give you the results of that vote and contest a little bit later on in the show. For now, though, we got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right to it.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It is a Star Wars podcast, and I'm your host, John Justice. Glad you're with the show again this week. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, we stumbled across this, and I knew it was coming out, but I completely forgot about it. But we were on Disney Plus on Friday, and on the banner on the homepage, when they put up whatever the big new releases are lately, you always see the Bad Batch up there in the Loki series. There's a brand new series that's out called Behind the Ride. And it's another one of these documentary series on Disney Plus where they, in this case, go through the history from the inception to completion of a ride inside of one of the parks in Disneyland. So you got the Haunted Mansion, you got Jungle Cruise, Tomorrowland, and one of the ones, and the first one that we watched yesterday was the Behind the Ride for Star Tours. Now, from a as far as the show itself goes, I don't really like this new format that they're doing on Disney Plus. They don't do it with all their documentaries. For example, the Imagineering documentary on Disney Plus is fantastic. I am a massive Disneyland fan, and it's been driving me nuts that I have not been able to get back to Disneyland in the course of 5 years when, since I was pretty much born, we would go as a family when I was a kid once a year. I had an annual pass. I lived down the street from the park. I went multiple times a week during the doing that thing with my fingers dark years of my life. I absolutely love Disneyland and have not had a chance to go to Galaxy's Edge yet. We were supposed to go last year and had an entire week's worth of vacation set up to stay at the parks. And of course, because of COVID, that didn't happen. So we've been trying to figure out a way to get back to Disneyland here, hopefully within the next year or so. So I was really excited to go and watch this show on Disney Plus, and I encourage you to check it out, even if you're not a fan of Disneyland or on a big fan of rides. It is a really neat show. But if you've watched the Imagineering documentary on Disney Plus, that's a really solid documentary, and it's done kind of straightforward with interviews and behind-the-scenes footage and old footage. What they're doing with this behind-the-ride deal is they're kind of making it snarky and adding in like a lot of quips and dad jokes, and it's like, just give us the goods. Anyways, that's just a minor complaint. It is a very, very interesting show, and the background you get on Star Tours and George Lucas and how it came about is really, really fascinating. On top of it, it's about an hour long. The first half is about Star Tours, but the second half ends up actually being about Galaxy's Edge, which is interesting as well. And definitely, if you haven't watched Imagineering, go in to the Imagineering documentary on Disney Plus and scroll through. Like if you're like, I don't feel like watching documentaries or whatever, just as a Star Wars fan, scroll through to one of the last episodes of that series, and they do spend about an hour or so talking about Galaxy's Edge. It really, really is fascinating. So check that out. But something really interesting happened and struck me when I was watching the Behind the Ride for Star Tours. Now, again, I basically grew up at Disneyland. You know, I didn't live very far away, and like I said, we went on a yearly basis. And in my early mid 20s, we were going there multiple times a week. And of course, Star Tours, being a Star Wars fan, was one of the destinations, one of the rides that we would have to go on multiple times when we visited, depending on how busy it was. So it didn't even dawn on me that in the upgrade and kind of in the original, so you had the original version, which used this original trilogy-esque story of Star Tours getting caught up in the rebellion, pushing back against the Empire, and then when they did the upgrade many years later, and they included locations from all of the films, because the prequels had been released. In the documentary, they lay out how they had initially meant to upgrade Star Tours when The Phantom Menace came out, and then they decided to wait all the way until Revenge of the Sith came out before they went and did the did the complete upgrade. So, what am I driving at? I'm driving at this. I didn't even put two and two together, but on the ride, in order for the Imagineers to be able to include multiple locations for the riders in a short period of time to go and visit, it's like, how do you go from, like Hoth to Endor, or from Naboo to Coruscant or whatever, right? Well, you would go through Lightspeed in your Star Tours speeder. So C3PO in the updated version would, put the ship into Lightspeed, and then when you came out of Lightspeed, you would be at another location. So Melinda and I are watching the episode on Saturday, and it dawned on me, and I went, oh my gosh, they're Lightspeed skipping. Now, I don't know if that was the intention of what J.J. Abrams did, right? It seems a little bit too... It seems like, how is that? I mean, how did they not pull that from Star Tours, and how did I not pick up on it? And I'm sure somebody has. I bet if I went, and I didn't Google before the show started today, but I probably should have, because maybe my revelation isn't all that new. But they did that in the original version too, that came out in the 80s of Star Tours, right? After they go through the asteroid, at some point they jump to Lightspeed. Oh, and then they end up back at the original location where they took off in the beginning. But when they did the upgrade to go to multiple locations, and within the ride itself, they switched from having to use film to video, it gave them the opportunity to expand upon that and be able to switch out the video, and they ended up adding in, obviously, when the sequels came out, they added in more locations. But the way that you travel to different locations in the middle of the ride is through Lightspeed, and essentially it's C-3PO Lightspeed skipping the ship. I just thought that was super cool. I love that type of connectivity, and whether or not it was intentional, I don't know, but it's fun for me as a fan now when I go and watch The Rise of Skywalker to think that, or the next time, pray we get to go soon, I get to go to Disneyland and I get to go on Star Tours again, I can experience that. I just thought that was really, really rad, and I wanted to go and share it with you. One more item on a personal level, and then we'll dive into... Actually, two more items on a personal level. And then we'll dive into all these casting and character rumors that have been coming out from Cinelinx, LMR Online, and also Bespin Bulletin. I wanted to make sure I give all the sources this week their proper due. Illuminati, LRM Online, and Bespin Bulletin is where I'm pulling most of my information this week. So, the other thing I wanted to share with you is, after watching that Behind the Ride documentary, I was, not surprisingly, I was in the mood to watch Star Wars, and just didn't know what I wanted to watch. You've got so many choices now, and I wanted to watch one of the theatrical films. I've been working through The Mandalorian as of late, but the way that we do our movie watching habits here at home. I ended up having the TV to myself, so I kind of had just a, I could watch whatever I wanted to watch. I didn't have to worry about whether somebody in the family was wanting to watch something different. So I ended up landing on Revenge of the Sith. And I ended up landing on Revenge of the Sith just because going through Bad Batch lately and really enjoying that. This last episode was probably the most filler of filler episodes in the Bad Batch. It was still really, really enjoyable, but it was definitely a filler episode. Unless there were some details in there that'll be fleshed out a little bit, in the final episodes of the season that I'm not aware of. It was enjoyable, but like I said, there wasn't much in there, if anything, at least that I saw, that really added to the larger storyline of Omega and what's going to happen with the Bad Batch. There was no Hera in it anymore. There was no Crosshair chasing him down in it. So, but anyway, because I've been watching the Bad Batch, which is obviously post Revenge of the Sith, I decided to watch Revenge of the Sith. This was really, really fun. So I'm watching the film, thoroughly enjoying it, and I'll take a moment to encourage you again. If you don't do this, please do. I at least try it as an experiment. When you go to sit down to watch any of these movies, take your phone or your laptop or your iPad, whatever you have that's a distraction, and put it away and just focus in on the movie as if you're sitting in a movie theater. I don't do that as often as I should, and my movie watching experience is never as enjoyable as it is when I just lock in and watch every frame as if I was sitting in a darkened movie theater. That's the way that these movies were meant to be watched. Even when there are boring parts, because that's what I do often, right? Parts that I feel like I can miss and I want to get to my phone. Whatever's happening on my phone can wait. And I may think, for me personally, that, I'm multitasking and then it's all enjoyable, right? But man, I put my phone away and sat down and watched Revenge of the Sith yesterday and was just thoroughly enjoying it and entertained. Just what a fantastic film that is. But when we got to the scene towards the middle of the film where you've got Mace Windu talking with Aayla Secura and a couple of the other Jedis and Yoda around the holograph table, and they're talking about how Palpatine needs to give up his emergency powers, right? It's the scene that ended up being replicated in Clone Wars Season 7 in the Shattered episode, where you find out that once that scene is done, because Anakin Skywalker is there and Anakin walks out, then Ahsoka shows up. And you get to see what happens later in that scene that took place in Revenge of the Sith. So what I did was I stopped Revenge of the Sith at that moment. And I went back. So this is right before Order 66 takes place in Anakin's turn, right? And I went back and I started Clone Wars Season 7. And I backed it up to where Darth Maul and Ahsoka are about to fight on Mandalore. And then I watched it all the way through the end before you get the jump in time in that final episode of the last episode, right? So I watched from the third, fourth, those last three episodes of that 4-story arc at the end of Season 7 of the Clone Wars. And so I stopped it after Ahsoka arrives on the planet, after the Star Destroyer goes down, where she's buried most of the clone troopers, okay? Because then in that episode, it jumps to later with Darth Vader showing up. So I stopped it there after Ahsoka is paying her respects to the dead clone troopers that died after Order 66 and crashed on the Star Destroyer. Then I went back and I watched the rest of Revenge of the Sith. And then I went back and I watched those final few minutes of the last episode of Season 7. That was such a fun experience. It was such a kick. And it was so easy to do within the Disney streaming app because it keeps your place, right? And I know there are a few different versions where people have gone and taken Revenge of the Sith and then they've spliced in chronological order what took place in Season 7 of Clone Wars. And what I wonder now is whether or not they've gone so far to go and splice in what happens in episode 1 of the Bad Batch. But if you got the opportunity to do that, to watch those together, either finish all of Revenge of the Sith and then go and watch those episodes or not, it was so much fun. And tonally, it fit perfect because just as things begin to get dark inside of Revenge of the Sith, if you remember from Clone Wars Season 7, the music is just ominous, right? This air of foreboding. It was such an enjoyable experience. If you can't tell, I was really, really excited to go and share that with you. So hopefully you had the opportunity to do that. It was a lot of fun. It's just really neat to see Order 66 from multiple perspectives, and then to layer that on top of Revenge of the Sith, and just made for a really fun night of movie watching. All right, one more item, and then I want to get into the news. The news this week.
This is not going to go the way you think.
No, it's not going to go the way you think, because I'm going to talk about Dune for a second. The full trailer for Dune, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, that comes out in October, dropped this week. I have not read the books. Okay, I know, shocking. I've seen about half of the David Lynch film. I know enough, but I know quite a bit about Dune. I'm really, really excited for this movie, right? Especially being a space opera fan and writing space opera novels myself. If you get a chance, go to YouTube and check out my friend Edwin Lowe's Lowdown Show, L-O, the Lowdown Show, L-O down. He did a Dune reaction video, a Dune trailer reaction video. You should go and check that out, the Lowdown Show, L-O, D-O-W-N, on a YouTube, and go and check that out. For those that don't know, George Lucas lifted a lot of what he did in Star Wars from Dune, right? I mean, the fact that Tatooine is a desert planet was kind of taken from Dune. George was inspired by Dune, and a lot of people have talked about how Dune is essentially kind of Game of Thrones meets Star Wars. But Dune did a lot of influencing on a lot of science fiction and a lot of influencing on George, and I'm really, really excited for this movie to come out in October. It makes me again wonder, when is Disney and Lucasfilm, when are they going to get back to the saga films? Is Rogue Squadron going to have any type of mythology attached to it? Because, as I've said very often, I think that's the wheelhouse where Star Wars thrives. It's that science fiction and fantasy element. And it is the mythology that we as fans really gravitate towards and like to speculate on. And that's why I'm excited for Dune. I'm excited for Dune because I really enjoyed Game of Thrones and I love Star Wars, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a big, expansive, world-hopping space opera. And we are not really looking at any content specifically right now within Star Wars that dives headlong into that. Now, the Acolyte might, what we're going to talk about here in a moment when it comes to the detail of the Kenobi characters, might go in and do that. But again, we're playing in a timeline where we know the outcome of what happens later on, unless we end up getting live-action shows or films that are offshoots from this timeline where they might occur within the same time frame of what we know from the original trilogy, prequel trilogy, and sequel trilogy, but in a different part of the galaxy. But I just can't wait for Star Wars to, again, give us something that's rich in mythology that we as fans can grab onto and speculate about. I think the only thing that I can really point to, and we're going to talk Ahsoka, is not Ahsoka necessarily. Maybe a little bit in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we'll get into that. But maybe the Acolyte, right? Perhaps the Acolyte might be the case. I did hear something interesting. I was listening to another podcast, and I think it was Knights. Was it Knights of Vader? It was Knights of Vader. Yeah, it was my buddy Zach over at Knights of Vader, and they were talking about how Disney recently began to release new versions of some of the old Legends novels. And the speculation was that Disney will be pulling from some of those old Legend novels at some point in the near future, and so they want to keep They want to keep these types of stories, even though they may change, top of mind. And we actually have some examples of some things that I've picked up on that I think are Disney, that is Disney doing some things that are very similar to what they said on the Knights of Vader podcast. But they're right. I mean, if you go into Walmart and look at some of their end caps, or Target, I should say. If you go into Target and look at some of their end caps, they have the High Republic books there, but they also have some of these old Legends books that are no longer canon that they've re-released as well, which is really, really interesting. So it'll be fascinating to see if the guys over at Knights of Vader are correct in their speculation. Also, people ask often what podcasts I listen to, and Force Center with Ken Knapsack. I kind of had pitched off of that show for a while and revisited it this week. They did a Ken Knapsack and Josh McCouga on Force Center did a really great episode this past week talking about the future of the franchise on the big screen. It's definitely worth a listen, and it very much falls in line with what I've been talking about on this show for the past couple of weeks. So again, that's a Force Center. All right, let's go ahead and dive into some of the casting reveals and leaks and rumors here on My Nerd World.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
First one comes from Cinelinx. Confirmation from multiple sources have come in with interesting details on who will be playing in the Kenobi series on Disney+. When casting was really just getting underway for the show, the Illuminerdi reported that it looked like they were going to be casting for both a young Luke and Leia. The article goes on to say, I can tell you that Leia is a part of Kenobi in a big way. In fact, from what I've heard, the stuff dealing with Leia is pretty much the impetus for the whole show and what gets Obi-Wan Ben into another adventure. Even better, they go on to say, I can tell you that Vivian Lyra Blair from Bird Box and We Can Be Heroes has been cast in the role of a very young Princess Leia. As for the other roles, we've been seeing a few characters, we will be seeing a few characters, potentially, who initially appeared in Star Wars Rebels, with the show itself set about 9 to 10 years before the events of that show. It makes sense that we'll see plenty of those characters pop up, which brings us to actor Sung Kang. Kang was part of the official casting announcement for the show. He played Han in the Fast and Furious series. Though no details on who he was playing were given, from what they've heard, Sung Kang is playing one of the Inquisitors, the Darksiders tasked with hunting down the remaining Jedi. In fact, in an interview this past week, Kang made mention of seeing Vader on set and reference to being put into a Star Wars costume. Both of their sources seemed pretty confident when they said that Kang was playing none other than the fifth brother who appeared in Rebels, and that was the male character from Rebels. That was alongside the Sarah Michelle Gellar voiced character, who's married to Freddie Prinze Jr., who does the voice of Kanan. And he always seemed like an Italian Sith to me. I don't know why. I think his voice sounded Italian, even though it probably wasn't. But that's who Sung Kang is allegedly rumored to be playing, is that fifth brother that we initially saw in Rebels. As others have reported, there seem to be quite a few Inquisitors, including another one we've seen before in the series. And yes, there will be plenty of Clone Wars flashbacks that feature a certain apprentice. From the sounds of it, Kenobi is really bridging the gap between the two eras and using stuff that we've seen from the animated shows to do it as well. Now, it's also being reported from LRM.com, right? So, they say, right, first we want to back up a report on the recent Sung Kang and Leia rumors in Obi-Wan Kenobi that was first broke by Jordan Mason of Cinelinx on Friday. Also on Friday, LRM reported that multiple Inquisitors would appear in Obi-Wan Kenobi, in addition to the character played by Moses Ingram. Okay, and again, she was believed to be playing an Inquisitor as well. At the time, we were not quite ready to reveal the name of one of those Inquisitors. Mason beat us to the punch in this article, linked later the same day. The story says linked above, but obviously I'm reading it, so. Sung Kang is the name that has been given also for an Inquisitor. At the time, we were still trying to figure out the second source to confirm Kang for us, which we've now done. Both sources seem pretty confident that they said that Kang was indeed playing the fifth brother. Now, here's what Mason said about Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi world. I can tell you that Leia is part of Kenobi in a big way, right? Pretty much the impetus for the show and who the character was. Now, LMR Online says we can back up Mason and say that Leia is indeed in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that this leads us to our own exclusive news. As far as how big of a role Leia plays, no reason to doubt Mason and Cinelinx. His sources have given legit information in the past. Their reveal was that R2-D2 and C3PO will also be in Kenobi. It makes sense if Princess Leia is around that we might see R2 and 3PO. However, LMR can exclusively reveal that both the droids, R2 and 3PO, will make an appearance in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Again, we cannot say how big of a role they have, but just that they're in it. Now, this would also, well, here, I'll just read the rest of this here. So when we first heard the news over the weekend, the Cantina co-host, Kyle Malone, was a bit worried. As Kyle pointed out, 3PO's memory wipe, he should not meet Obi-Wan again before A New Hope. However, as they said to Kyle, just because they're in it doesn't mean they share any scenes with McGregor. In fact, it's possible that Princess Leia won't be in any scenes with Kenobi either. Okay. Also, Mason said that in his report, we will see flashbacks of Obi-Wan and Anakin in the Clone Wars. Look, I'm really confident when it comes to the story group that they're not going to go and make massive mistakes like that when it comes to continuity errors. I know you get small ones every once in a while. Like, it's a little bit weird because I was sort of inadvertently when prior to watching Revenge of the Sith along with season 7 of Clone Wars last night. Over the course of the past few days, I sat down at lunch and I put on Disney Plus and I tossed on Rebels, and it was the Twilight of the Apprentice arc of the final couple of episodes of season 2. Is that right? Season 3? Season 2? And it dawned on me that we are seeing an episode where Ahsoka actually comes into contact with Darth Maul again for the first time since she really saw him going back to that season 7 of the Clone Wars. And while there isn't a direct reference to that, it's not jarring. It kind of makes sense given how they parted ways when Darth Maul escaped from the Star Destroyer as it was crashing in that final episode of the Clone Wars. Spoiler alert. All right, a couple more bits of news here. This one comes from Bespin Bulletin. The source that they are talking to, of somebody who is on set, isn't a huge Star Wars fan and doesn't know the name of certain characters, right, and certain items. But from what they described for them, right, their understanding is confirmation of the armor for the Inquisitors has been made, and the source saw multiple lightsaber hilts, and when describing the appearance of the lightsabers, the response without prompt was circular guards around the handle. I don't know how many Inquisitors will appear, but it definitely seems like more than one. Okay, so that makes sense from the standpoint of we all know, whether you liked it or not, we did get SaberCopters in Star Wars Rebels in those episodes that I was just talking about of Twilight of the Apprentice. I thought they were cool. I don't know how they would transfer to the big screen or how just in terms of physics they work, but I thought they were neat. Just from a story element in a cartoon and giving these particular characters the ability to travel across a great expanse within the story in a short period of time. But the circular guards around the handle, even if they don't turn them into SaberCopters in the live-action show, certainly would indicate that, again, further confirmation of the Inquisitors being in the Kenobi series. Rumors of Inquisitors appearing in Kenobi started back on May 4th, when, again, Queen's Gambit star Moses Ingram posted a video of herself training with a lightsaber. Several days later, Corey Van Dyke, formerly of Kessel Run Transmissions, said that he heard from one source that Ingram was playing an Inquisitor. 3 weeks ago, Making Star Wars reported they'd heard an Inquisitor or Inquisitors would be making an appearance. And on July 16th, Cinelinx reported that they heard Inquisitors were making an appearance about Sung Kang, all the information that we reported before. So, further confirmation of Inquisitors from Bespin Bulletin being in the Kenobi series. Then we get back to LMR Online, and they had another scoop this week. 1 year ago, LMR broke the news that Lucas was planning on expanding the Disney Star Wars Plus shows with Ahsoka and Boba Fett, along with a combined Ezra Bridger and Thrawn show. Since then, Disney has announced the upcoming shows, The Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, coming in December 2021 and 2022, respectively. With the debut of a live-action version of Ahsoka in The Mandalorian, we learned, right, that Ahsoka is on the hunt for Thrawn. It's safe to assume that Thrawn and Ezra were together since the last time we saw both characters as they were being taken into, spoiler alert, in Rebels, last episode, hyperspace by the giant Purrg Guild, the Space Whales. While we haven't heard any new updates of the Ezra and Thrawn show, we do have an announcement to share from LMR Online. We are now confident in reporting that Mina Massoud has been cast as Ezra Bridger, along with Lars Mikkelsen playing Grand Admiral Thrawn. Massoud is a talented actor who rose to stardom playing the role of Aladdin in the Disney live-action remake. While his popularity grew after the movie, the opportunity for new roles did not come as fast as he would have liked. Safe to assume that the new role Massoud would be busy for the next few years if he was playing Ezra. A while back, Mina posted on Instagram a photo of him shirtless with the caption gaining a lot of attention. And it was, "Hey, just so you know, when I escape, I won't hurt any of you," which, of course, is a reference to a line from Ezra Bridger in Star Wars Rebels. Kessel Run Transmissions had originally reported that Massoud was the favorite and talks were ongoing. However, Massoud is now signed on, LMR Online can confirm. At the same time, the news of Lars Mikkelsen coming to the Mando universe as Grand Admiral Thrawn is welcome news for fans of Star Wars Rebels. It was Mikkelsen himself that voiced Thrawn in the animated series for 17 episodes. Thrawn is one of the most unique characters in the Star Wars universe. He was first introduced in the novel Heir to the Empire back in 1991, quickly rose in popularity, which has led to multiple novel trilogies, comic book appearances, and animation. However, he is the only character that has transitioned from the expanded universe into Star Wars canon. What makes the news perfect is the age of both the characters would be relatively around the age of their respective characters. I think fans will be happy with these choices, especially that of Mikkelsen, whose voice work has become iconic. And he really does fit the visual image of what Thrawn looks like as well. Look, this is really exciting news. I'm getting more pumped up for these shows as we learn more information. The year is flying by, and before we know it, we are going to be, up to our eyeballs in new Star Wars content. Any complaining of not having enough Star Wars content will have gone out the window by the time 2022 rolls around. How do you feel about any of these announcements? Does it get you any more excited for these shows and what they're doing in live action? I personally hope that they continue to follow what The Mandalorian has created in terms of being entertaining. I've been relatively disappointed by the Marvel live action shows on Disney Plus, and really do enjoy The Mandalorian and been enjoying The Bad Batch, and so I hope that they are good even beyond just being Star Wars good. You know what I mean? One last point, and then I want to get into expand a little bit about what I mentioned on the bonus episode earlier this week. It's interesting that they included Hera in Bad Batch, because getting back to doing things intentionally, I have no evidence of whether or not the story group or the writers of these shows or Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau are a part of any of this, but it was really interesting that we got an introduction into Hera as a young Hera in the Bad Batch for those 2 episodes. And I can't help but feel that Hera arriving in the Bad Batch was deliberate to send people to Rebels to find out more of her story and prepare her for live action, either in Rangers of the New Republic, The Mandalorian, or Ahsoka. That is to say that Disney has all of the data in terms of which pieces of content they've created has sparked a lot of interest. And I can't help but wonder that perhaps Rebels isn't, as popular, right, as the Clone Wars or any of the live-action shows have been. I guess Mandalorian has been. Or The Bad Batch. So to include Hera is a good opportunity to kind of say, hey, if you guys don't know this character, we're going to spend 2 episodes to introduce you to her. You can find out more about her in Rebels, but get ready because she will be coming to live action soon. It seems like a bit of a laying the groundwork for Hera to arrive in the future, and so the casual hardcore fans have a bit of an idea of who the character is when they arrive on screen.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
I just want to expand a little bit upon something that I mentioned again in that bonus episode, talking about Rogue Squadron and it being the next film that we'll be seeing on the big screen coming up in 2023. The Michael Stackpole books, as I mentioned, were based on post-Return of the Jedi era content. So it makes some sense that they could be using those books as a guide or a source as they look to potentially set it post the Rise of Skywalker, which in my opinion has tons of potential. Listening to, was it Star Wars stuff this week? Let's do a lot of Star Wars podcasts this week. It might have been Star Wars stuff. It's funny how art is so subjective and fans want different things, because one of the hosts on there was adamant that they wanted Rogue Squadron to be placed in the sequels because that's where it belongs, and that it would be a massive mistake to place it after the Rise of Skywalker, where I sit back and go, I go the other way. I think that we've had plenty of content in that original trilogy era. It's tough to raise the stakes in that original trilogy era when we know the ultimate outcome of the galaxy at the time. Let's start moving forward post-Return, the Rise of Skywalker, and begin laying the groundwork for these future stories. Plus, speaking of potential, there's no reason why you couldn't definitely have Poe in your Rogue Squadron film, right? Or even small or big roles for Finn and for Rey. Daisy Ridley kind of falls into that category of Mina Massoud, who we mentioned earlier, who she's doing other work, but she hasn't been really able to break through beyond an occasional role here or there in a film beyond Star Wars. Maybe that will happen sometime in the near future, but it kind of reminds me a bit of Emma Watson. Emma Watson has done films beyond Harry Potter, but she's still kind of known as Hermione. Getting back to what could happen storyline-wise, I mean, what happened to the rest of the First Order fleet? There was only one First Order Star Destroyer in the Rise of Skywalker over Exegol. I know we saw other First Order Star Destroyers going down around the galaxy, much in the same way they did post-Return of the Jedi. They did that in the Rise of Skywalker. So I suppose you could argue either way, that the First Order could indeed be gone, right? Or what else was the point of those shots? But I think it's very plausible that you could have a similar situation to what happened at the end of Return of the Jedi going into the Mandalorian series. We could be kind of duplicating what happened and what we've been seeing happen post-Return of the Jedi in the Mandalorian, but we do that post the Rise of Skywalker with the remnants of the First Order, and perhaps we're following a different group of individuals as opposed to a bounty hunter like the Mandalorian going off and going on these missions. We follow a group of starfighter pilots that are looking to tamp down rising crime in the galaxy over the remnants of the First Order, desperate to find a place in a galaxy that's in a state of flux and change. There's my pitch, Hollywood. Go do it. I'll give you my email address. Patty Jenkins is talkshownerd@gmail.com. So what do you think Again, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Drop us a comment on YouTube when you get a chance. I would love to know what you think of any of these casting rumors, your level of excitement when it comes to the live-action shows or Rogue Squadron. What have you been watching? What Star Wars have you been watching lately, and why? Before we dive into listener feedback, on next week's show, we will have some audio that I just unearthed when J.J. Abrams was making the press rounds for The Rise of Skywalker. Some fascinating insight that I missed during the promotion of The Rise of Skywalker. So I'll share that audio with you next week. And one more item, and then we'll get into listener feedback. Thank you so much to everybody who voted for Embark Book 3, The Vanishing War. I thought it was going to be Embark Book 1, but it was Embark Book 3, The Vanishing War in the Tail Flick Discovery Contest. I ended up winning, which is fantastic. This gives me an opportunity to get further exposure in front of Hollywood producers, exposure on the Tail Flick website, sending out to the individuals that use Tail Flick in Hollywood that my book won the Tail Flick Discovery Contest in the science fiction category. So it's what it's all about. It's all about the exposure of my books and hopefully getting somebody who wants to create live-action content, my stories, and the potential for them to go and option them for something live-action. So thank you to everybody who voted and propelled me to victory in that contest. Was really, really happy that I ended up winning and made for a fantastic weekend. If you're not on the mailing list already, of which I announced this initially, go to mynerdworld.net and put your email in the prompt on the homepage when you arrive there, mynerdworld.net.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, listener feedback this week, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment up on YouTube. First one comes from Brennan Marr from Page Turners They Were Not, friend of the show. Hey, John, yesterday I was watching a show, and one of the panelists said something that got me thinking about fan service, and as a result, I've come up with a theory regarding the topic. The more somebody likes a movie or show, the less likely they are to complain about too much fan service. And the less somebody likes a movie or show, the more likely they are to complain about too much fan service. Furthermore, I feel that all the geek/nerd-oriented movies/shows are fan service to some degree, and that people should stop using that phrase as a bad word. What do you think? No, I completely agree, and I think that a lot of it has to do with, it's just a byproduct of social media. There's good and bad with social media. Honestly, if Facebook and Twitter went away tomorrow, I wouldn't care. Well, then why are you still on Facebook and Twitter? Because they're necessary to get your stuff out there because people are on them. It's a necessary evil. But I think a lot of this fan service argument really has entered into the culture because of the ability that people have to put out their opinion at a moment's notice and have it shared and reinforced by other individuals. But it comes back down to the subjectivity that art has. I love The Rise of Skywalker. Other people hate The Rise of Skywalker. Some people think it's fan service. Other people like me don't think it's fan service, but even if it is, they don't care. And that's just all about the subjectivity. As far as people not using that phrase, that's up to them. You know, I think it's a means for people to go and try to substantiate their criticism of a particular product that they happen to love. But at the same time, if that's what they want to use, it's what they want to use. And if you don't like it, you don't have to agree with it. But that's the subjectivity that art provides, is that it really is subjective depending on the person who is taking it in. And one person's art is another person's trash, and another person's trash is another person's art. So, but I agree with you. The fan service argument seems to be one that really only gets put out there in the negative light for people to try to reinforce their criticism, especially of a Star Wars product. Brian Martin asks, if Luke's X-Wing was functional on Octo the whole time, then why didn't he use it to travel to Crate instead of sacrificing himself to force project there? Well, I think the situation is, even if Luke had taken the X-Wing 1 to Crate, he may have been sacrificing himself anyways, and Kylo Ren would have been the one to kill him, where Luke spares Kylo from killing him directly, like he did his father. But at the same time, there may be a more practical reason. We read in in the book, The Rise of Skywalker, that it took Rey a little bit of time to fix the X-Wing from being underwater, especially with the wing being used as a door, even though there's no wing missing when he pulls it out of the water, and I wish they would fix it in the movie, but it's not enough to make me hate it or take me out of the film. But be that as it may, when Luke raises the X-Wing from the water on Ahch-To, it's got all 4 of its wings. Okay, so perhaps Luke just didn't have the time to go and fix the X-Wing, since he decided that he was going to go and help them after he went and met with Yoda when trying to burn the Force tree. So I think there's a lot of practical reasons why Luke did that. And sometimes it just comes down to, speaking of practical, it comes down to the element of storytelling. It makes it a more interesting story for Luke to teleport himself off of a rock in order to compete with Kylo to allow the rebels to get away while, again, not actually physically being there. So it may just be a product of the storytelling, but practically, in a practical sense, I think there are easy ways to explain that, which I feel like I just did. And lastly, we got a message here on YouTube from Stephen Cross, who says, I agree with you, John, that the First Order in some sort of way still exists after the Rise of Skywalker. The Final Order may have been destroyed, but the First Order, not quite yet. My guess is that there are probably several areas of the galaxy where the Final Order still have a commanding presence. The Battle of Exegol, very similar ways to what happened after the Empire following the Battle of Jakku. I think this would be perfect for a TV series or maybe even a trilogy to show what happens after Episode 9. I loved the movie, and the movie itself gave me so many theories and ideas for what happens next, which is why I enjoyed J.J. Abrams' work. He did a fantastic job on The Rise of Skywalker. Always enjoy your show. Thanks, Stephen. I always enjoy somebody who shares their love of The Rise of Skywalker like I do. I think it would be interesting, and I agree with everything you said. I also think it would be really interesting if we found out that there was another Snoke. We saw multiple Snokes in those tanks at the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker. What if there was another one that was created that's still alive in the wake of the Emperor's death, maybe now untethered from the Emperor in the wake of his passing? He now is in charge of some remnants of the First Order that needs to be battled against. That would be really interesting, in my opinion. You could even go and make sort of a different Snoke, where he looks the same in appearance, but he has a slightly different personality. Maybe he isn't wearing so much gold. Isn't wearing a gold bathrobe, Although I dug that outfit, don't misunderstand. But I think that would be really, really interesting. And that kind of goes back to something I've said before on the show, that I really wish that Disney would just ignore the fandom and go all in. Like, I would love it if they announced tomorrow they were making episodes 10, 11, and 12. I think that would be bold, and you want to talk about sparking speculation in the fandom. How amazing would that be, right? They won't. And we know they won't, because Rogue Squadron's coming, which hopefully will be great. But if I were in charge, man, I'd say, let's lean into the controversy. And let's continue telling the saga post the Skywalkers, and what happens to Rey. Does somebody find the lightsabers? Is Ben Solo speaking with Rey from beyond the grave as a Force ghost? I mean, I think that would be great. Just lean into all the controversies and go for it. But hey, that's me, and that's why I write my own novels, Embark, which you can find at mynerdworld.net or at amazon.com under John Jon Justice. You can also find me on social networking under at John Jon Justice or at the My Nerd World on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram at the John Justice on Instagram. Jon, and on Facebook, Jon John Justice. You can find me there as well. All right, that wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed the show this week. I'll be back again next week, and wherever you are, I pray that you are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. And thank you so much for checking out My Nerd World. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.